First Nations people of Wisconsin. So I'm excited to welcome you here tonight to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Title IX. It is hard to believe that only 50 years ago, this federal law took effect, which states, "No person shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity." This means equal access to academic programs, extracurricular activities, clubs, athletics, and much more. While our country has made great progress in the last 50 years, we have much more work to do. And that is why we are joining forces at the university and in the community to raise awareness to the work that still needs to be done, and why 2 years ago we established the Institute for Women's Leadership at UW-Green Bay. I hope you take some time and learn more about this institute at UW-Green Bay, as we want our region to know that this is the place to go for networking, leadership training specialized for women wanting to advance in their careers, personal and professional development, and support to help women achieve their goals. As Title IX was a pivotal step in achieving equity for women in the educational setting and in women's sports, I am pleased to introduce to you tonight one of our spectacular women leaders at UW-Green Bay, Abbey Sutherland, head coach for our women's volleyball team and senior women's administrator for UW-Green Bay Athletics. Coach Sutherland and a dedicated committee put together a phenomenal panel of speakers for you tonight. Abbey is in her 5th season as head coach of the Green Bay volleyball program. She made an immediate impact, coaching the Phoenix to the league championship and the NCAA tournament appearance her first year. In season 2, she led the team to a 21-9 record, garnering the program's first victory over a Power 5 school, Ohio State. And the Phoenix ranked 45th overall on the NCAA RPI, the highest mark in program history. Sutherland is passionate about developing women leaders and serves as the athletics women's senior administrator. With her leadership, UW-Green Bay has also raised more than $60,000 for Alzheimer's awareness. She is a member of the Green Bay Optimist Club and serves as UW-Green Bay's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee Chair. She is especially proud of her team's GPA of 3.5 and above. Sutherland came to the Phoenix after spending the previous 5 seasons at UW-Stevens Point, and she enjoyed a standout career playing at St. Norbert College. She received degrees in Spanish and secondary education in 2004 and a master's degree in teaching languages from Southern Mississippi in 2006. Sutherland is also a graduate of the 2019 NCAA Women's Coaches Academy, a 4-day educational training designed for women coaches to increase their individual effectiveness by learning advanced skills and strategies that directly affect their personal and team success. So please welcome our moderator for tonight's panel, Coach Abbey Sutherland.
Testing. It works. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Cheryl. Before we get started, I would like to introduce the chancellor. Really grateful he's here. He's a pioneer for helping women become more prominent with leadership. And as volleyball defines leadership, we say it's modeling desired standards and behaviors. And the chancellor does that for he leads me, I would say, and then step 2 we say is yearning to follow, and he does a really good job of making people want to follow him because he's vulnerable, he's authentic, and you know he's real. Let's welcome the chancellor.
Thanks, I'm not sure what to say after that. That's, it's very meaningful for me to be here tonight, and I will do my best to say why. I have a funny relationship with Christopher Paquet, who really is in charge primarily he does a lot of things for the university, but one of it is to help make sure we have great policies. And I'll be honest with you, when I took this job, I wasn't in love with policies. Because I always felt you just do the right thing, you try to do the right thing, and sometimes I get caught by assuming that everyone's going to do the right thing and try to do the right thing. It's difficult when everyone believes the right thing is something different. And Title IX, to me, is an amazing example of what happens when you make a great policy. We shouldn't need it. Right? To me, what Cheryl read is unbelievable. We have to write that down. But if we look back 50 years ago at UW-Green Bay, look at the leadership of UW-Green Bay 50 years ago, look at the leadership now. Look at the number of women's sports, look at the number of women's sports now. Look at the number of students who are women, and look at the number of students who are women now. That policy made a difference. It's really, really important that we take a minute to celebrate that, to hear from amazing leaders in our community and beyond, and understand why at the forefront of this was at educational institutions. Right? Because in my opinion, education empowers. Right? And I think Coach Sutherland I would turn right back to you. I watch how she coaches, and coaches, I think, is a metaphor for what she really does for the students on the UW-Green Bay volleyball team. She demonstrates amazing leadership, and she empowers them, and I see it every time she interacts with them. And that's what Title IX, it just gave voice to that, right? It said that there's no questioning that this is the right thing to do, and it made sure that institutions like UW-Green Bay were held accountable for it. So we didn't have the choice, right? We had to do the right thing, and you could see the results in this room and beyond all across our campus. So it's an honor to be here and an honor to get to hear this panel, and very grateful to have people like Coach Sutherland on our campus. So I hope you enjoy the panel tonight, and thank you for being here.
So we want to hear a lot of stories. I think that's what makes things exciting with the panel. We'll be asking questions to help with that. Before, though, we've got an expert on Title IX. I was a little nervous to be a moderator at first because I do know things about Title IX, but I don't know enough, and I don't feel confident enough to speak about the history. But thankfully, we have Christopher Paquet here, who is the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Policy and Compliance and our Title IX coordinator. So I'm going to start with asking you a few questions, and then I'm going to introduce the rest of the women. Christopher, can you just give a brief introduction to Title IX, and what is one thing you wish more people knew about Title IX?
Thank you, Coach. So I think the important thing is, obviously we have panelists here, we have a lot of members of the audience who are athletes. Most commonly we associate Title IX with athletics. That is where it's most public. But when you read when you heard what Cheryl had said, athletics isn't part of that code. It is about accessibility. And it's hard for people to believe, and those of us who are of a certain age, 72 doesn't seem that long ago. But for the younger people in the audience, it wasn't about whether or not you could have equal locker rooms or equal resources. It was about whether or not a school could say, no, we will not take female students. And what Title IX did, like the chancellor said, is basically said to everyone, you have to do the right thing. You have to allow accessibility to education regardless of gender. So I did a little statistical, not a lot, because I promised you I won't, but a little statistical. Between 70 and 2012, the number of women who received bachelor degrees tripled. That is directly as a result of Title IX. So I think it's really important, and while we're going to spend a lot of time speaking about the impact that Title IX had in athletic careers and how that works, it is about access. One of the most significant things that is going on, and I think for those of you who maybe follow it, right now we're going through rulemaking again on the federal level for Title IX and what it means in the world of sexual misconduct. And basically in 2011, the Department of Justice, through the Office of Civil Rights Compliance, issued a Dear Colleagues letter that said sexual misconduct was so prevalent on the college campuses that it represented a barrier for barrier based on gender. And that's how significant that sexual misconduct had become on campuses, that the federal government said we have to apply Title IX rights. So that's how we get into some of where we're at right now, with Title IX being very much attached to sexual misconduct and due process and judicial conduct. So I think when we talk about it in terms of athletics, a very important, very public piece. But another thing to remember is it was as recently, and again, some of us, 1996 doesn't seem that long ago, Tiffany, it really wasn't, But in 1996, Title IX had to be invoked in a federal case against Virginia Military Institution, 1996, to compel the entrance of female cadets into that institution. So this is not the distant past. I mean, this is a law that continues to have applicability throughout higher education and all education.
I got caught in hearing Tracy tell stories earlier because the news is here, which is wonderful for our university. But I'm going to get fired up as we continue to talk. Christopher, can you talk about just highlights of the history of Title IX? And then also before that, it's important that everyone knows, like when I went to the Women's Coaches Academy, it was 4 days, and it's working on keeping women in coaching. But they were really big on talking about Title IX and the men who support us. So it's not women saying, this is us women, this is what we need to be doing. We couldn't have done this without people like Christopher, people like the chancellor, who are supporting us and working to pass that law. And so that was a big part of Title IX. We couldn't have done it without men, and that's a big message as well. But if you want to talk a little bit about the history of Title IX and things you think are important.
Okay, without repeating myself, again, I think that the most important, the most significant history is this is only 50 years old. Now, in the overall context of the federal government, when we think about things like the ADA, when we think about things like equal employment opportunity, those things, ADA in its inception, not in its current function, but those things predated this. So there are, again, when we think about gender equality in education, it just amazes me that we're only talking about a 50-year period of time and how far we have come in that 50-year period of time. And the accessibility and the equality that we shouldn't have to be, to echo what the chancellor says, we shouldn't have to be compelled to that, but it gives somebody the right. It doesn't mean that somebody's trying to do the wrong thing, but it gives somebody a platform to come in and say, I think my rights have been violated and I need to put you to your proof, institution. You have to prove to me that they're not.
Thank you. And we'll have Christopher chime in because he is just full of information, which I really appreciate. We also have Tiffany Paalman, Jeanne Stangel, and Tracy Arndt with us. Let's give them a round of applause. I'm fortunate to coach Tiffany on the volleyball team, and her story is incredible, just with her background of working hard and putting in what the team needs to get where we want to be. Just thinking about getting to know Tiffany as a person since 2019 when you came on your recruiting trip, and she's the type of person who says she's going to do something and she follows through. And where she is now as a player, where she's one of the best players on our team, to where she started as a freshman, just speaks testament to her strength as a woman. And I just really think you're going to be an incredible woman leader. You are now, but wherever you get a job, everything that you've done to pave the way for Green Bay volleyball is going to be in your professional career. And I've also gotten to know your mom a little bit. I know she's a strong woman, Julie. She led, a program called Strong Women, Strong Coffee. And so Tiffany gets some great messaging from her mother. And so we're excited to hear your perspective. You have really grown up knowing about opportunity, whereas we have two other women from other generations who will have perspective on their stories. And then also we've got Jeanne Stangel, and she is a Hall of Fame women's basketball player for UW Green Bay, so that's pretty great, isn't it? As women, we also talk about having confidence, and females aren't as good at, we say, tooting their own horn. So I don't want to just read a bio that doesn't do any of you justice. So you're allowed to talk about how great you are and what you've accomplished. Both of you, because it's just, you're going to have so many great things to say. And then we have Tracy Arndt, who swam for Wisconsin around the time of the Title IX passage, but her story is very unique and inspiring, and I think it will open a lot of eyes of some of the younger females who are in here. And she grew up in the Green Bay area, correct? Correct. Yes, and you learned to swim on the bay. In the bay. Okay, in the bay. Pretty great. So I'm going to open up for questions to hear the stories. So how did you get involved in your sport as a young girl? Did you have schools recruiting you? What opportunities were there? Who were your role models? So just telling some stories.
Well, I'm the oldest, so I'll start. I'm a pre-Title IX athlete. I'm 70 years old, so Title IX was when I was 20. I started swimming in the shores of Green Bay, and my parents had a cottage out there that my dad built, and every summer he would teach us all how to swim because he had to be water safe if you lived on the water. Every winter we forgot how to swim. Every summer he'd teach us how to swim. And when I was 8, lo and behold, you could take lessons at the YMCA, which I did. And that was probably the only time I was recruited to be a part of the Green Bay YMCA swim team. It was really the only organized sport that was available to us. And I participated in that till I was a senior in high school. I was pretty good at it. I have a lot of ribbons and medals and trophies that I brought home. And all my friends were on the team. We just had a really great time.
Tracy, do you have a microphone you can hop on, I think,
Do I?
over there?
Oh.
There we go.
Do you want me to start over? Did you hear that? Okay. Is it on? Yes. All right. When I went to high school, there were no sports for women. You could be a cheerleader, or we did have track. But this was in the 60s, and those were the only two opportunities we had. We were cheerleaders for football and basketball, and that's all we were able to do. When I was a senior in high school, I won the 50-yard freestyle at a national meet, which was a pretty big deal. The meet was in Green Bay. It was at the YMCA, and we thought that was pretty big stuff. At that time, there was no recruiting to any college programs because there were no college programs. So I went off to college. I went to UW-Madison, and I discovered that there was intramural swimming for women, and it was at the bottom, if you know anything about Madison, Lathrop Hall. It's this little bitty pool, about the half size of a competitive pool, no lines in the bottom, and if you're a competitive swimmer, you need the lines because you're going to go straight, and it wasn't very competitive. So I started going out to the natatorium to swim. It was a new building, pretty exciting, and had 8-lane pool, lines down the bottom, big diving well, and I would go out there and practice during free swim. And one day I went out there, and the young coach, his name was Jack Pettinger of the men's team, saw me swimming, and he said, "Would you like to practice with the men?" I was like, okay. And he said, "And I want you to go out there and swim 2,000 yards of backstroke." Well, that's 80 lengths of the pool backstroke. And for some reason, I did that. Then I got out of the pool, and he said to me, "You know, you'd be a pretty good swimmer if you lost some weight." I hear your gasps, but I say that because this was the time. This is what it was like back in the late 60s. And I said, well, I didn't say anything about the weight, of course, and I don't think I lost any. But anyway, I started to come down to the natatorium to practice with the men's team. But this was a fairly new building at this point, and they had a really nice team locker room for men, and they had a really nice locker room for the recreation majors. If you're a FIAD major, you got to use that. Because I was in the School of Agriculture and not a recreation major, I couldn't use that recreation locker room. there was no women's locker room. So when I came to practice, I changed in the coach's bathroom. Those were my facilities. I had they didn't give you a cap, they didn't give you a suit, they didn't give you warm-ups, they didn't give you anything. Now the guys had suits and that sort of thing, but not for me. There was one other young woman, Delynn, and she was a diver. So Delynn and she practiced with the guys in the diving well, and I was with the men. It was fun, basically fun. Delynn and I went to a couple of meets, and at one of the meets, we scored more than the men's team, so we were feeling pretty good about that. But we had no support. There was no support system for us. We weren't supported academically. We weren't supported in transportation. It was a really, really different time. I stopped swimming in '72 after an injury. And, one thing I did get to do, I went on a training trip with the men. They went to Florida, and we swam with Indiana, and there was Mark Spitz. Now, any of you seen those commercials where Mark Spitz, he's pretty old now, he has my color hair. Anyway, he was a big deal back then, so that was pretty exciting. But there just wasn't the team spirit. And about 20 years ago, Wisconsin had a reunion for the female swimmers, and they invited some of us back that had participated in athletics prior to Title IX, and they gave us letters, varsity letters. Even though we weren't a varsity sport, it was an interesting time to go back because there were groups of women and they were all part of teams, and then there was me, and I didn't have a team to talk to. But it was a really interesting perspective for me too, because so much had happened. My daughter is 40-ish, and she was recruited by Michigan to swim. She had a scholarship, and she got the gears, the caps, the competition suits, the parkas, the bags, the transportation, all of that. And that was one generation. So a lot has changed since then. But you also have to understand that back then we had the Vietnam War going on. I mean, you sat around and you watched, listened to programs where they drew the numbers for if your draft number, and you had classmates that were drafted. We were just at that, I was just at that age where women started not wearing bras. We thought that was pretty cool that we could not wear bras. I mean, really racy stuff we did. So it was a really different time. When I was in my senior year in college, I went to the medical school. I was interested in becoming a physician. And I can remember the interview. It was with an older gentleman. And we were talking about medical school. And he said to me, "Now, do you understand that if you take the place, you might take the place of a man who's going to support his family?" I was like, "Oh, okay." I'd never been told by my parents that I could not do something. And so I'm saying that just because it was a real fight for women back then. It wasn't, we didn't really have the opportunities that you all have now. It was a very different time. I'm really happy at the progress we've made. I'm not regretful that I didn't have those opportunities because I think I made them in other ways. I learned a lot from being an athlete. I learned that I was competitive. I learned how to work hard. I learned how to have respect for the team at the YMCA. I learned that hard work does pay off, and I learned, I think what was most important, that winning feels really good. And once you win, you want that feeling again and again. And losing is a good lesson, but winning, you want it in other parts of your life as well. And I think that's what's pushed me as I've grown up into being the person I am. I mean, I like to win, I like to play, and that's kind of my story.
I have a follow-up question. I have more because I heard you tell the story earlier about how you were injured, and so there was no support for you to carry on, whereas you have a group of women who can support you if you are injured, and that must have been really difficult for you. So it was just an interesting comparison. Can you please elaborate on that?
Sure. When I was a junior in college, I was still practicing with the guys. Now, I wasn't the fastest, but I wasn't the slowest. That was always a good thing. And when you swim, you do flip turns, and one of my heels hit the wall, and it just split open. And it's kind of a devastating injury in a couple of ways because it takes a while to heal. But secondly, then every time you do a turn, you're thinking about the last time you did that turn, and then you hit your heel on, and you were injured. So that's when I stopped swimming. But you're right. Nobody came and said, "Oh, are you going to come to practice soon?" Or "How are you doing?" Or "Can we help you with your medical expenses?" Or any of that. There wasn't anything to return to for me. There was no team. There was no support. And even though I adored the coach, I was done. That was about it.
Thank you. We're going to hear more stories, but would love to hear perspective of what you thought of her story from either Tiffany or Jeanne.
I'm impressed, but you cut yourself short, Tracy, in a big, big way. So, and actually, Tracy and I, we've known each other for a long time, and a lot of that was because of my connections here and being a student athlete here. So there's probably about 12 or 13 years difference between us. And it's even interesting to hear what you have gone through versus, what was coming 10 years later. And I mean, I was 7 when Title IX. I knew nothing about Title IX. But I think in our community and growing up here, I was sheltered from that. I think that, a lot of folks who were here, whether you were a boy or a girl, and maybe that was because I was the youngest of 5. I had parents who were very supportive. I was first generation college, so I had brothers and sisters that went to technical school, but as having an athletic ability opened up a whole new door for me. And in high school, we were better than the boys. I mean, we'd play the boys and whip up on it, but it was great. But part of that, too, was because I was the youngest of 5, and I had 2 older brothers that whooped up on me all the time. And I started playing in the barn, in the middle of it was the middle of winter and cold, but with my brothers playing basketball in the haymow. Now, for you, those of you that didn't grow up on a farm, that doesn't mean anything to you, but it's in the barn. And then after that, as I probably started playing on a team when I was in 7th grade, and I was always the tallest in the class. I was always in the back row, whatever it was, but I was always around tall people, so I never realized I was tall until after I graduated. But the opportunities that we had were good. I mean, they were really good. And coming then to college, the only reason why I chose to get a baccalaureate degree was because of basketball. At the time that all of my friends were going to NWTC, and all I could think of was, they will be done in 2 years and making a lot of money, and I'm going to be here for another 2 years. That was my block. And it was my parents and actually being recruited, so it actually came down for me being recruited between Madison and UW-Green Bay. And a lot of that, I was a small town girl, so keep in mind, I grew up in Algoma, which is 20 miles away. It was a world away. I was a youngest of 5, I was a baby, I would cry every time I went to the bus, and that was probably until I was a senior in high school. But it was the opportunity to have a college degree, and everybody was encouraging me, you should do that, you should do that. And it was the people around me that convinced me it was a good thing to do. And what it came down to was, I did a lot of this. I had a lot of letters, and big deal. I had boxes of letters of invitations and things from the Hawkeyes to whatever it was, to Michigan Tech, but it came down to Wisconsin and Green Bay. And I remember getting the call at home, and again, I went for a tour down at Madison, and it was amazing. It was amazing. They took me everywhere, my parents everywhere. We went to hockey game. It was the whole dog and pony show, and it was impressive. And I was scared to death. It was a big school. It was a big step. It was a long way from home, but everybody thought, ooh, go be, a Badger. And I remember getting the phone call at home saying, Jeanne, and it was not from the head coach, it was from her recruiter, that said, you know what, we just don't have a scholarship for you. If you want, you can come as a walk-on. And I cried. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because then I ended up coming to UW Green Bay, started school here, ended up playing against my high school rivalry, who was Sue Bodilli, who is now retired. But here for Sue, yes. And she played for Southern Door, and I played for Algoma, and we ended up coming here together. And that was a big issue. It was like, And within 48 hours, we became friends, and a lifetime later, she's my best friend. So that's just one of the things, too, that athletics means. But I can tell you, my first month here at school, honest to God, I cried every day. I went home every weekend, and my parents kept saying, it'll get better. Go back. And I cried, all my friends are going, and they're all doing this stuff. It'll get better. So thanks to them, I stuck with it. And the opportunities that we had here, and at that time we were NAIA, so we were not Division I. Actually, my senior year was when we made the full transition the following year. But we had amazing opportunities. And I'm not just saying that because this is my alma mater and the chancellor's sitting right here. I can't say anything bad. I have nothing but good things to say about what that experience was. You know, and again, I was here 83 to 87. We flew. We flew to some of the most wonderful areas, California, Florida, and New York. And I want to just point out the experience that we had in New York was absolutely amazing. So just think about this. We played against Princeton, Brooklyn University, and West Point Academy. And at the time, we thought West Point Academy, they don't even have a women's team because it was a military, it was only about men. But it was the most amazing experience ever. Part of the deal, too, was that one of our players had a brother who lived there, so we went everywhere. We were standing and looking up at the Twin Towers. I mean, we were at the New York Stock Exchange. We went to towns. I mean, everything that you ever wanted, and it was all planned out for us, and it was beautiful. I would have never had that opportunity if I did not participate as a student athlete here. So I'm forever grateful to my alma mater, but I will say the reason why that happened was Coach Carol Hammerly, who was our first SWA. I played in that role later when I came back to work here. But she was just a true advocate for women and would not say no. You know, she started the No Limits banquet, of which your mother was a recipient. I believe you were also a recipient, just honoring women in the community that were doing great things for women. So as a student athlete, I never really felt the impact. I mean, yeah, the guys had a bigger locker room, and I mean, we just had a sweaty little stinky thing, but we still had our own locker room, so that was a step up. We traveled well. We didn't have the budgets, obviously. I mean, I see what you guys have. Oh, golly. So, but I'm proud of everything that you do. But again, that's where the tradition started here, and we always had a great program. We still have a wonderful program. And I know that's a lot of weight on your shoulders, but you carry it very well. I still support the program. I'm a season ticket holder. I probably realized more of a difference for Title IX when I came back to work for the university in athletics. I was actually our first compliance coordinator, and that was a half-time position because I did that, and then I did academic advising on the side, and then I later became our senior women administrator. But from that perspective, I saw more inequity in that position. At that time in the Horizon League, there were athletic directors, none of those were females. Their right-hand person, in almost every case, guess what, was a woman. And we sat quietly in the back. We did a lot of the work. I remember when I first started, this is when the NCAA still did audits, compliance audits, and we had to prepare that thick book. Chris, lucky you weren't around here. But a lot of it talked about Title IX, and it became more of an issue, more of an awareness for me because we had to make sure that we were offering equal opportunities. So, and at that time they talked about what was called proportionality. So the student athlete population had to mirror what the campus looked like. So if you had a population of 60% females and 40% males, the athletic program should look that way. So that's why we had said, I mean, at that time, the minimum number of sports were 14, but that's why we offered more women's sports, was just to reflect that. So we weren't under watch or whatever compliance would be to make sure that we stayed within those realms. But that's where it really became more evident to me. And the thing is, even as a student athlete, and it helps to be in athletics, whether you're in administration or what that looks, because like anything else, right? You can say, I know because I've been there. But what we found, and again, the SWAs would get together afterwards without the boys to talk about all the issues that we dealt with, but that's really where the inequity was because, and it still is, it's a man's world, it's a boy's world, and there were opportunities for me to continue that route, but my life changed and things changed, and I've experienced, the private sector, and one of the things too that athletics, and there's so many things, so many lessons that you learn being part of an athletic team, the whole competitiveness, working together as a team. And actually, the first job that I was offered when I graduated was working for IBM. And they told me at the time, and I mean, you went through all these testing things, and when you talk about structure, about the blue suit, and you had to look like a man when you started to work. But they went to the point to say, we actually look for student athletes to hire because we know you have the skill set for something that's going to take a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, a lot of time management, and that's going to be this job. So you've already gone through that training. We know you can do that. We can teach you the other stuff. So that, again, was something that was an opportunity that was presented to me because I was a student athlete. And again, IBM back in 1987 was a man's world. That's why we dressed up looking like men, but we had to wear pantyhose, okay? But it's still the dark suit with the white, and again, it was that whole issue, and then coming back and working for the university, it was me more about, I understood what the student athlete went through because I had gone through it. But now as an administrator, it was a whole different level of responsibility to say, well, now I have 230 student athletes to look after what that means for what they're trying to do. So that's probably the biggest difference that I saw with Title IX. But again, I was in a very fortunate situation of being able, and again, Carol Hammerly, if you haven't watched her video, watch the video because she was an advocate. I mean, and we talked about things, it just wasn't about, Abby, it was about how do we find more female coaches that can do this, and what tools do we give them to help them? We struggled with that. We still struggle with that, and we're blessed to have you, by the way, so thank you. And to see you be a successful woman just makes me sit back and go, yeah, good for you. But again, it was those opportunities, and again, we still have a long, long way to go. I mean, look at what happened with the NCAA basketball tournament. Really? Who was even thinking that was okay? So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but the one thing I do want to mention, I'm a firm believer in destiny and why things happen. So Tracy and I ran into each other about 3 weeks ago at the farmer's market, and this is on, I can't make this stuff up, okay? So we kind of talked about what this all meant, what to avoid saying, we're all in this world of be careful, be sensitive. And that night I had a dream. I was in a parking ramp way up at the top, and I wanted to back out. And all these cars were coming up the ramp, but I needed to go down the ramp. So I was trying to back out, and people started honking at me, you're going the wrong way, you're going the wrong way. But I need to go that way. And they were all women. I'm serious, I can't make this stuff up, right? They were all women driving, and all of a sudden, Tracy drives up next to me, and she said, Jeanne, you're going the wrong way. And I don't know how it happened, but my car turned around, and I was going with Tracy and all these women the right way. And I woke up in the morning, I thought, that is kind of like what we're talking about, because it's all about creating awareness and creating that support and working together as a team, as women. And it became much easier in life for me to go with the women who were with me in the right direction. And to me, that's what Title IX is about. So it was like I woke up, I'm like, wow, that was real cool. I'm going to have to tell Tracy when I see her that. So I told all of you.
Thanks, Jeannie. My very first day on the job in 2018, the women's basketball team had a selection show at Green Bay Distillery, and there were hundreds of fans at the Green Bay Distillery waiting to see where the women's basketball team would go. And it was just such an encouraging first day on the job because of how supportive the community of Green Bay is for women's athletics. And it's just really inspiring for me and makes me excited to be a volleyball coach here. Tiffany, what do you think about all of this?
I was really excited to hear both of your stories today, and Coach and I were actually just talking about resilience the other day, and I think that is a word that I would put for both of you is resilience, because where I'm at right now, if I have a problem or an injury, I could find 2 people at least to help me with that problem, and to think that you didn't have those resources to even help you with an injury or the mental blockage to get over that injury. It's really inspiring that you shared your story and just hearing the different perspective that you have. And then you as well with such a successful career, and then also coming back and helping Green Bay from an administrative perspective. I work at the front desk in the office, so I get to see a little bit.
I will hire you. I will hire you. I'm right across the street. Seriously, we'll talk.
Just hearing your perspective too from beyond athletics and being a woman out in the real world per se, and how resilient both of you have been is really exciting, and I'm excited to share my story and to think that you both have paved the way for me to be where I am right now. So thank you for that.
We're always working to keep perspective on our team, and so our team cares. We want to do great this year, and that's awesome. Can you speak about how that puts into perspective? So it's like we play 4 home matches this weekend, and we get to play in front of our home crowd, and it's really exciting. But today we were starting to feel the nerves in practice. When we talk about this, how does this give you perspective?
I think it just allows me to recognize each of the people that I have around me, like that support system, and appreciate the little things, because those are things that I wouldn't have had, that we didn't have 50 years ago. I have a mental performance coach that I talked to yesterday that he helps me every single week just with trying to play volleyball the best I can. And that's something new in athletics, especially focusing on mental health and trying to be have the best game that you can, but having 90% of it be the mental side and maybe 10% be physical. I have athletic trainers that I see every single day. I have a wonderful staff of coaches that I come in and can watch film with. I can go in their office at any time of the day. I have an academic advisor, Coach Klein, who everybody knows and loves him. And I just have all these people around me, and to think that that's something that is because women have spoken up and said, we need these things to be able to succeed is really special, especially going into our home matches this weekend. Just, I think, appreciating every person around us, and it's because of hearing your stories and recognizing that there's a need for people like that around us.
Isn't Tiffany great? Tiffany, can you give us a little bit more about your story and relate it back to what this means in relation to Title IX?
Yeah, so my story, I didn't start playing volleyball until I was like 12, 13, which is a little bit late for most people. I was playing soccer for most of my life. I could play any sport I wanted to in an organized setting. So I was playing soccer and decided to switch over to volleyball as I went into high school. I was also able to play club on top of high school sports. I was a 2-sport athlete, and then I was also a wrestling manager because I grew up in a family of wrestlers, so I get being beat up by your brothers. And I'm the oldest, and they beat me up, and they're 6 years younger than me. So I was able to play soccer and volleyball in high school, and then I was able to do track as well. And then I started playing club and started the recruiting process going into my junior year of high school. And it was scary. I get the same thing. I was going all over the country. I went out to Washington. I went to Washington, D.C. to look at Georgetown. And I remember our call very well with Coach Abbey. It was you were hired very recently, and then Corey was hired maybe like a week after we called. And I was on the way home from a different recruiting visit, and Coach Abbey talked a lot about empowering women and getting fans at games, which I think relates exactly to what we're talking about now, and just getting exposure for women's athletics. And I remember that was different than any other coach, because I always ask, what's your goal for the team? Because you're 16 and you want to ask the right questions. And that's what you said, instead of trying to say, oh, we're going to win a championship, like every other coach says. So I think that's really special to recognize you as a leader wanting to highlight women too, beyond just playing the sport. So I ended up committing as a walk-on going into my senior year of high school. Played my senior year, came here in 2019. I redshirted my first year. Didn't play, but I think it's the best experience I could have ever had because now I get to stay for longer. And we always talk about being a learner in the gym, and being a redshirt, that's like the perfect time, is just to absorb everything that you can in the gym. And then we unfortunately got sent home for COVID in my going into spring. So that kind of changed college athletics and also just college in general as a whole. But coming back, we've been able to have an incredible amount of resources. Like I said, my mental performance coaches, at one point I was talking with a dietitian who works for the Packers, just to talk about how to eat right as an athlete, which is something too that I can't imagine would have even 30 years ago. I have strength coaches that I talk to every other day that always try and make us better on the court. So now I'm in my senior year now, and we're going to play some great matches this weekend. Please come. We play at 7 on Friday. So I think just thinking about how all these opportunities that I've had is ultimately because women like you have spoken up and said, this is what we need, and have gone through so many different obstacles that I personally, as an athlete, have not experienced many obstacles about being a woman athlete. And I'm incredibly grateful for you and also your teammates, and then the men that supported you on your swim team as well, that gave you kind of that opportunity to just feel welcome on a team. But yeah, that's my
Thanks,
story.
Tiffany.
Yeah.
Tracy, thinking about awareness of, Title IX, probably not even knowing it needed to happen while you were an athlete, what were your thoughts while you were actually swimming with the men?
You don't know what you don't know. It's interesting to think that there was a time when the opportunity for women to have that athletic experience and all that brings with it wasn't available, that the culture in general didn't feel like that having the opportunity to compete, to be athletically healthy, to be mentally healthy, to understand what it means to work out and practice, and the mental health, that those opportunities weren't even a glimmer in anybody's eye, that wasn't a thing. It's really hard to think back that far. And, I don't know. Like I said, I didn't know what I didn't know, other than there was a beginning of a women's movement back then. But I didn't understand what the implications might be for me as a female athlete, or what it would be for the future of women. So when you ask me what I thought about it, I didn't really think so much about it, other than the fact that I did really think it was very wrong that I couldn't use that dang FIAD locker room and had to use the coach's bathroom. Yeah.
That makes complete sense. You didn't know the future. What does it mean to you to hear Tiffany talking about her experience?
Well, I'm thrilled, actually, because again, your experience here will form your lifetime ahead of you, and will give you so many skills that you will find useful that you don't even know that you have. And I think it's developing all of that as a person, as a woman, will be so helpful as you move forward. And I'm just thrilled for all of you. I'm thrilled not only for the uniforms that you get and the bags and all that stuff, but and the opportunity to practice, but for what it's going to mean as you develop into your own person. And that's a really special opportunity. So I'm really thrilled for you all. Do
any of you have women leaders who are really important in your life. That's a big thing I've got on this blue paper here, is the lack of women coaches in the NCAA. So this is from 2018, but of the 3,500 women's NCAA sports, only 1,463 are women coaches. And so I didn't realize that that was an issue until I went to the conference. There's nothing wrong with men coaches. I'm not saying that, but there's a reason that women get out of coaching, because there's stresses to provide for your family, and you're the one who has to raise the kids. One of my best friends is the coach at Loyola, and she had a baby in July, and she's coaching in season right now. She brings her baby, beautiful baby, my goddaughter, Lucy, with her. And I'm so inspired by her, because I didn't realize what a big deal that was, that women have to put in so much extra to work to be leaders. And it's hard to just get a leadership position. It's harder for a female. So I guess any thoughts on that from our panel?
I can go. You talked about my mom. It's my mom. She is a business owner, and as well as my dad too. My whole family's business owners, actually. But my mom, she led Strong Women, Strong Coffee, and I learned a lot from that experience alone. Like, I learned that you cannot buy land as a woman without the signature of a man until 1982, right, Mom? So I've learned a lot from her, and then just watching her run a business is really special. And then the support that she gets from my stepdad as well, and that they want to see that in my future relationships too, of just being a strong woman and knowing what you want and going and getting it, is what I've learned most from my mom. So I think my mom is my number one leader.
Any impactful women leaders in your lives?
Mom always comes up, right? So I think part of it too is, once you sense and you build female leadership around you, you know what to look for. And, I would say the same. I mean, I was very fortunate. My mom was always supportive. My parents ran their own business, and my dad was out talking to all the customers, and my mom was in the back doing the bookkeeping work and saying, "Barta, get back to work." So I understand that, but I no longer have my mom. But through that time, I've filled that void. And, I look out into this community right now. I've already mentioned Sue Bodelli, who has, when you're an athlete and you're an athlete together, and for all of you who are here, you go through the highest of times and you go through the lowest of times. And understanding that when that happens, it's about trust, right? It's about having that trust that I know that Susie's got my back. She's going to pass me. She's going to yell at me when I miss my layup, but I should be yelled at. But it's that trust factor that takes you into life, and then dealing with other issues as they come up. And I don't care who you are or whatever, everybody here has something that pulls at their heart, but we all say it's all good, right? It's all good. But knowing that there are always people that you can go to, she became one of my go-to people. So, and other folks, I take a look, and then once I was in the community, being able to find other leaders or people that would take me under my wing, or under their wing. Sue Porath is here tonight. She's a dear friend of mine. Actually, we met each other because our kids were in school together. But she was the one that said, "Jeannie, you should be in the optimist group. Jeannie, you should be, let's co-chair the power of the purse." But it was those connections. And then that led into the Women's Fund, which is just a strong group of female leaders that we help inspire girls and do things to bring them up with us. And then I take a look, and then Kate Owens, who is one of our current board members at Curative Connections, is here to support. And it's like, when you find people, when you can smell that support, you surround yourself with those people. And Tiffany, you so have a job when you were done. She has to go for 5 years. But that's what I think it's all about too, is when you have that, it's the sisterhood, and it's keeping those connections, and it's knowing what that is, and it's helping the next generation come along. I take a look at what you deal with like right now from a student athlete perspective. The bar has so been raised. And to see that you have resources that talk about mental health issues and nutrition, we didn't have any of that. But then again, we didn't have the level of intensity that you have right now. So when I come back, and whether it's softball or cross country or volleyball, basketball, whatever it is, the levels of intensity that you have, the travel schedules that you do, I admire what you do. So as much as you think that we're passing on to you, you inspire me to keep going, because it's that feeling of satisfaction saying, wow, we still have it, and even though it's more intense, women are still stepping up to the plate and helping each other, and that's, I'm hoping, what everybody is learning as you're going through and having this great opportunity. Take that with you and take others with you. And then the last ones I'm going to say, because the most important ones are sitting up there. I had 3 girls. 2 of my 3 are here, and it just gives me great pride. Now, there were sacrifices, because raising a family and working and doing all those things, it was a balance of I was at work and I felt guilty I wasn't at home. I was at home and feeling guilty I wasn't at work. So these poor kids, when they were VCR players, would come to work with me on a Saturday while I'd be doing work and they'd be watching Barney on TV. When I had to do volunteer activities, I said, you know what? You're going to come and volunteer because you're going to like it. But they have learned things, and for me, the most proud moment that I have is to see each one of them, all so very different, but they are strong. They support one another. What I like is when we get together, and they don't always talk to me, but they'll go off and talk to each other. I'm like, what a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing. So it gives me great pride, and I thank you, my 2 beautiful daughters. The other one is out in Boston, so she had a lot further trip that she couldn't make. But what's so proud of them, and again, things that they share back to me, a lot of times you think that people aren't watching, people are watching. And now I have, and she has 2 of my grandbabies that I'm very proud of, and one is a little girl, and I take a look at her saying, what are things going to be like for her as she's growing up? She has a wonderful mother and a wonderful auntie that kind of help her, but again, it's about women helping women, not saying that men are not supportive. In most of my career, I was very fortunate because in almost every job I had, I always reported to either the president or the CEO, and in most cases that was a man. So it's not always about women either, but it's about understanding who those people are who can take you under your wing to help you get to that next level, realize what that is, but never forget about what you leave behind or what you're building for the future.
Thank you. Tracy, any women leaders you feel important to mention?
Well, mothers must be a big deal, because just like you've had amazing mothers, I have an amazing mother also. And I watched my mother from a very early age and witnessed her life of service to this community and to student athletes and to the women's basketball program and to the women in the men and women in the St. Norbert music program. And for me, it affirmed the value of the journey that we all go through, but it also demonstrated to me, I don't think there's been an organization, a nonprofit in the city of Green Bay that my mother hasn't touched in some way. And having that as a legacy, yes, it's a lot to live up to, but it also demonstrates the importance of being a leader and how to get people to follow you and doing good in the community and giving back to those that make this a great place to live. I don't know, she's a really special person. You should all get to know her.
Okay, moving on. What is still missing or changes still needed for further equity? Or is there any good news you want to talk about?
I have some good news. One thing that I think just going forward that happened yesterday that was really special was the Kentucky versus Louisville volleyball game was on ESPN, not ESPN Plus, not ESPNU, it's on ESPN. I found out that is the 4th regular season volleyball game that's ever been on live TV. And in the past however many years that volleyball's been a Division I sport, which I think is really special. And it wasn't an NCAA championship game. It wasn't a replay. It was on at 7 p.m. when everyone's watching. And I think that's really important for any women's sport. To be put on that kind of stage is really, really cool, because I think it just gets people excited about women playing sports, and that women can do hard things and they can do really cool things at the same time. So that's some good news that I think should keep happening.
Along with that, so volleyball's getting more attention. We want all other women's sports to get attention. But something I'm waiting for in NCAA women's volleyball is for a women head coach to win a national championship. A woman head coach has yet to win a national championship in volleyball. And so I'm really hopeful for that. They're starting to hire, there's really not a ton of women coaches in the Power Five, but we're getting there, and maybe it'll be this year. Maybe it'll be Green Bay.
Can I just make a comment about coaching? I coached swimming at Ashwaubenon for about 20 years, both boys and the girls teams. And I think about the support that the school now gives coaches. I find it to be incredibly wonderful, I guess. I can remember jumping into coaching. I was asked to coach the girls team, and I was looking for an assistant coach, and UWGB had a wonderful team, and I knew some of the men that were swimming here, so I approached one of them, and he said, yeah, he'd be happy to help coach the girls. And I went to the athletic director and said I'd found this really great guy, and he knew a lot about swimming, and I was sure he'd be a great addition to the team. And he said, you can't have a man coach swimming. I'm like, why? I said, you have men coaching women's basketball, and their outfits aren't that much, bigger than the swimming suit. But that's what he said, because women were in suits, and I shouldn't have a college-aged man come and coach. So I think that just the temperature of that whole thing has changed, because never even crossed my mind. I was looking for the best person to help me that I knew could be an effective coach, who had a team of men and women around him. It wasn't such a big deal, but it was a big deal then. Anyway, I did get him. He did help me, so that was a good thing. But it was interesting, too, that they let me coach the men, and they were kind of small suits. So go figure. It's just interesting. I mean, there's still some obstacles. I think one of the things that, and Jeanne and I talked a little bit about this, I have a concern about women in sports and about women's athletics. And I don't know whether to it's the transgender issue. Are you glad I said it, Bridget? Because, and you all know about it, but it just concerns me. I'm not here to judge a transgender person one way or the other. That's not what I worry about, but I worry about the opportunities for
We're working hard with me being the senior women administrator to make sure that that's something that, I know it's a really hot topic. I'm passionate about our student athletes and whatever's important to our student athletes. And so the equity part and the equity piece is important. And we talk about being able to have conversations where you disagree within the team, but representing a student athlete for their identity is really important too. So that's why it's like we respect what Tracy says so much, and then this is where we're still talking about how things are changing between the generations, and so that's something that we're okay with talking about, because we've got student athletes and people who are Tiffany's age who we want to support and figure it out, because it's complicated. I want to ask Christopher something. So we've been able to work together with me being senior women administrator, and I can tell you're really passionate to be an ally and help women. Can you speak on why you're passionate about that?
I hope that's not anomalous. I seriously do. I really hope that my perceived passion about equality is not anomalous, and I certainly don't perceive it to be so, but I'm flattered. And again, thinking about a woman leader, I'm looking around this room, thinking about the incredible leaders we have in this institution. And I'm not saying Cheryl because she's my boss, but Cheryl, Kate, heck, I thought I saw Janet up there. Was Janet here? Okay, see, I'm not always mean to you, but all of those women are incredible leaders for this institution. Wendy Woodward is also, but Coach, your passion is infectious on me. So that's part of why we can work together. We're both passionate people about things like that, but working with you is an honor and a privilege, and the way you've embraced that SWA role, the way you've embraced your Title IX co-coordinator role, this is you right here. So give yourself credit for that too. That being said, one of the things that struck me as I heard everybody talk, and I heard particularly, we start with Tracy and then we hear Jeanne, and they're generationally different. So we have Tracy, who didn't even have female teams. We have Jeanne, who came in and had, the advent of collegiate athletics on a competitive level. And now we have Tiffany and the young ladies who are here today. And it just speaks to the empowerment. It speaks to the empowerment. If somebody said to Tiffany, you got to go change in coach's locker room because we don't have a locker room, I guarantee you're going to see him, our compliance coordinator, the first thing and say, what's going on? That would not, the empowerment and the fact that, I heard a couple times from both Tracy and Jeanne, we didn't know what we didn't know. Well, now we know. Now we know that it is unacceptable for the NCAA to promote a tournament that is the same sport, the same rules, the same everything, and say, but you get these locker facilities and this other, because of their gender, they get a different locker facility. It's just something we don't tolerate anymore, and it's not even a thought. The fact that the U.S. women's national team had to go so far to get equal pay, not like profit share. We're talking about equal pay for performing the exact same work. So, I see things like that, and to me, it tells me how far we've come. I'm a father of a daughter. She tried volleyball. It didn't take, but she's now a power lifter, and she's a collegiate power lifter. So, I'm passionate because of those reasons. I also have a very strong woman in my life who's, I consider to be a community leader, and my wife that, also, instills that passion in me. But again, Coach, I think your advocacy for women on this campus, particularly when it comes to these issues, has been second to none. So.
As you get older, I realize the importance of, being a woman leader. I've said that, but I'm just hoping to make an impact, and I'm so thankful for everyone that came out today. We've put a lot of hard work in from starting in May, lots and lots of emails. We said we weren't going to do many emails, and then there ended up being a lot of emails. We tried to use Microsoft Teams, but we did at times. So Alexis, is Alexis here? And you might have class. Alexis is the one who designed the t-shirts that you all got. So raise your hand, Alexis. It's been really fulfilling for me to see her become a leader and take things on. And so please be loud and proud when you're wearing those. In general, I'm curious. I want to keep asking questions. I want to talk to the student athletes about what they thought about this event, hopefully just bringing light to the history and what it means. I'm also looking at a woman that I coached at UW-Stevens Point, Sarah, who's right there, who I'm so thankful to have that relationship, and she's an example of another strong woman. So I just hope people leave here inspired and continue to have a conversation. Before we exit, we're going to ask questions, And you're not off the hook. We're not going to just sit here and no one's going to ask a question, because we have some incredible people up here who have stories and thoughts. So we have a roaming person with questions. Yes. Can we please get some questions?
Hi. First off, thanks to all your. I enjoyed listening to all your stories, and I was kind of inspired by them quite a bit. My question was kind of about burnout. I think that's an important topic for student athletes. My mom, she was going to be a collegiate athlete. She wanted to be a swimmer, but she got a lot of burnout because back then there wasn't a lot of support for her. So I guess as that continues to be an issue, all three of you come from different generations. So how you dealt with your own feelings of burnout, how you've helped teammates, or just in general, how do you work through those emotions?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's something that every athlete goes through at one point or another, whether they like it or not. I've experienced bits and pieces, but I've been grateful enough to have amazing teammates that I can lean on during that time, and amazing coaches too that I definitely lean on during those times. Especially with, I actually said this during camp this summer to some like 11-year-olds that probably had no idea what I was saying, but that being an athlete is a full-time job, and this university especially recognizes that that's how it is for athletes, and they're super supportive of that. I have a professor here who's really supportive of that as well, but it's the best full-time job you could ever get. Like hands down, because you get to play the sport you love with the people you love every single day. So that's something that I've kind of used that as almost like a crutch if I'm ever feeling a little bit burnt out, is that I'm just playing the game I love with people I love, and it's just a game, and I just want to have fun. So, yeah.
I would say I could talk about burnout for a long time, because we had to do something that was incredibly abnormal during COVID. Like everything that our program is about with connections. We weren't allowed to use our locker room during COVID. We were talking to each other with masks on. There was no place for us to have connection. And so all of a sudden I found myself not liking coaching, and I was like, why am I not liking coaching? And then my husband, who is a wonderful supporter of me, I come home and he knows, like, I'm just like, what is going on? I can't figure this out, but the why behind what you're doing is really important. And so what fulfills me is empowering women leaders. And so remembering, going back to that. And then the other thing, especially for females, and you can do this with males as well, is attaching your self-worth to an outcome. And that's easier said than done. Like, I can easily say, well, okay, we lost. I am not I'm not the loss, but deep down inside I could still be internalizing that. And I think I got in a habit of attaching wins and losses, because I have experienced success. And then I have to hear a bio that's, someone read my bio and I'm like, oh, that's a lot of success. I better keep doing this. I gotta keep being good. But I've found a way to find what's fulfilling and just do it for myself and for a why, and realize that my character and who I am, I'm going to make mistakes as a coach. I am trying to talk to these women every day. I'm Cora, if she's here, I've called her every day, acting like a lunatic, trying to, figure things out. And I'm going to make mistakes as a leader, and I'm going to say things that are wrong, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. And so for a while, I thought I was a bad person because we were losing, and it was a miserable place to be. Or I'm trying to coach these women, and we're only talking about volleyball. Don't get me wrong, I love volleyball, but I don't do it because of volleyball. I do it because I want to have relationships, and I want to see what these women can do. So I think you have to do some really, really hard work. I see a counselor. My mom has Alzheimer's. I've had to work really hard to be in a good mental headspace to be able to handle coaching. And I know it's just like that for student athletes. And so I really work to preach that to our athletes, that they are more than the wins and losses, because it's hard enough. You internalize that. They don't need to hear me saying that, even though there already is pressure. So that's a little bit of my 2 cents on burnout.
Yeah. Continuing from the burnout issue, and first I would like to know that we are talking about the past and present of Title IX, and I'm a professor here in journalism, and I could find out two things that can differentiate the past and present, and I found out that Tiffany mentioned that you got some regular mentor coaching, right? And I want to know whether in the present, whether female athletes had some kind of regular mental coaching. Yeah. And also, I'd like to add that we have Dr. Morrissey and we have Dr. Alan Chu. We have really great psychology program. I know that our program might help you for the mental support. But I want to know about the past. How about the past? How do you get any mental coaching?
Tracy kind of talked about that a little bit. It's one thing to play the game, and it's another thing to teach the game. And like when my kids were little, I helped, and it was more or less just to give them the support they need because I knew they were there for the companionship and ice cream, and the coach was there to say, you got to play harder. So I was more like the balance. For me, I took those coaching skills into my professional life. And I take a look at now in the leadership role that I have right now, and I'm to the point where, and again, life is continual learning, right? Bridget, we talk about this, continuing to learn, expand yourself, to challenge yourselves, and again, continue to do that. And we talk about what the future is to have a voice. Have a voice and keep pushing because we all are going to fall, right? So what we talk about, like in our leadership teams, fall forward. We work with people that are struggling with Alzheimer's, with brain injuries. And again, the challenges in life, and I think, and Tracy mentioned this, sports teaches you perseverance. And you take that into life because life is going to throw challenges at you, things that you expect and things that you do not. But it's more about how do you rebound from that and what does that mean. And I think sports really teach you that. We talk about mentoring and coaching and all those things. And I think a lot is in my leadership role of all the other things that I have to do. And Chris, your wife is wonderful because I work with his wife. She does work for us. But it's about understanding when you step in. And again, yes, we've got a big role of understanding that we have to be able to budget things and sign contracts and do all that. But to me, I take a look at this thing, and as a leader, a lot of times we just want to take that on ourselves, right? That's the biggest mistake. If you are a good leader, you surround yourself with good people, let them do what's in their wheelhouse and understand what your role is. I just went through, when I first started this position, I went through some leadership training, and what that person was, he's like, Jeanne, grant yourself grace. I was 3 days into the job, and I couldn't figure out how to run the place. And he just said, you're a leader, you are now the orchestra conductor. And the more I understood that, and again, it comes back to trust, the more that I understood about my leadership team and to say, you run with that. You are the expert. If you need someone to say, atta girl, that's the right thing, or atta boy, that's why I'm here. But I think those are the skills when you talk about coaching. I am a coach every day. My kids, I coach with my kids. I coach with people in my lives. That's what it's all about. And again, I think for all of you that are current student athletes, that's the biggest gift that you can develop, and then take that into any aspect of your life, whether it's still in the realm of competition, in your sport, or anything that you're going to do in your family life or your professional life.
Well said.
Hi. In terms of the future for Title IX, what is or are your commitments to supporting transgender or athletes who are transgender?
That's a great question. That's something that I talk about every day with Jermaine. We're working on, we've got a DEI webpage that has policy. Stacy was here earlier, but that's something that I'm willing to have a conversation about, and that's like Jermaine, we're learning every day because there's things that, like, I'm open to it. I feel like I have an open mind, but it's about working to have conversations where it's scary to other people. And so, like, I think no matter what, people need to feel supported, and they need to be seen and heard, and they need to be able to be themselves. And so talking with Josh and Jermaine, that's something that we feel is really important. And that's something like I'm still learning. Like it's not like I love talking about it because I'm not, I feel it's the same thing about Title IX. I'm not as educated about it as I want to be, but I'm not scared to talk about it because I'm willing to have those tough conversations. And so we're having those every day, and we're working to be better. Like I'm on Zoom calls as senior women administrator to work to learn, because what's most important is that our student athletes feel safe and that they want to come here. And so for me, as in my admin role, that's what's most important. And that's something that we can talk about with our volleyball team. Because I'm sure people have questions, and you're a brave enough young woman on our volleyball team who's willing to have those conversations.
Coach, can I speak to that? From a Title IX perspective, okay, it has gone back and forth, but currently the Office of Civil Rights Compliance dictates that an individual has the right to be treated as the gender that they identify. This institution mirrors that and continued to mirror that from the time that it came out prior to the last administration through that executive administration revoking that letter of Dear Colleague letter, and now with the reinstatement of that Dear Colleague letter. So from a institutional perspective, an individual under our Title IX assessment is entitled to be treated as the gender at which they identify. That being said, there are powers beyond this institution. There's the NCAA, there's the Horizon League, and unfortunately, well, I'll try not to use judgment, the state legislature has wanted to opine on those things. But from an institutional commitment, and Chancellor can step up and grab it away from me if I'm wrong, we treat individuals with the gender that they identify, and we will continue to do so.
I would turn that back to you, and I would say, what do you think needs to be done? What are the challenges? And again, don't always be looking up to say, what do other people think? You're the next generation that's coming in, dealing with issues that are new for all of us. So my advice to you is start a voice and start sharing your information, share where you stand, and help educate other people on where you're at.
Right, of course. Yeah, and I try to do that, as I'm sure my teammates and coaches can testify. I'm very outspoken, and I try to not only encourage knowledge, but enforce it in a way. But yeah, I mean, per this conversation, trans women are women, and I love hearing that you're in support of this as somebody who deals with legislation. And I'd love to talk to you more about what support means to you in terms of these things. But yeah, no, you're right, and I'm trying.
For Tracy. We've heard your fellow panelists talk about the support that they had. Your teammates, your coaches, all the support staff that you have. You didn't have any of that. What was your support?
My family. As I mentioned, my mom and dad never told me that there was anything I couldn't do. I would come home from swim meets and there'd be signs on the door. And when I went off to college, they didn't come with me, but I knew they were there rooting for me. But again, when you don't have the team, it takes a lot of intestinal fortitude to continue forward when the path is so difficult, and there doesn't seem to be a path because you have to forge it. And you know, after my injury, I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to do it, and because I didn't have the support. So.
I'm Tracy's younger sister by 10 years, and I just want to say thank you because I was a student athlete as well. We didn't know any different in our family than competing, whether it was cards or swimming or skiing or whatever it was. But when I got to high school, I had all those opportunities. I didn't know that there wasn't women's basketball, women's swimming, women's tennis. And that was a short 10 years later. And I feel really grateful because that really formed who I was. And I went off to Madison and started swimming. And we were in the men's sweats, but we had them. And we were sort of thrilled at the time that we did have them, not knowing any different. 10 years previous, it was completely different. We had our own locker room. It wasn't super nice, but we were thrilled to have it. So I really, really appreciate the ground that was broken. It's super important because I also have student athlete children, and the strength that they got from doing high school sports and sports all along, the opportunities they had, as you all know, are just life-changing. And to think that it wasn't always this way, in my family it was always this way, but to think that it wasn't this way outside of my family and to hear these stories that I've heard over and over, it still is shocking to me. But thank you so much.
Hello. So obviously you all have, look out at the crowd. These are some female athletes right here. And you know what? They're wearing their own uniforms. They got a really nice locker room, for the record. Not that I know, but they told me so. And they have their own space to practice in. And I think that's amazing. I really would love to hear each of your thoughts. And I'd really love to hear them from the oldest experiences to the youngest. Because I'm sure it's really weird, and I thought it was really cool. I'm sure you had a cool moment, getting to know these wonderful ladies here who, they didn't have those experiences we do. And even though, you've grown older now, I'm sure you have a lot to say about the fact that you've worked with students who do have those experiences, and you have family now who have those experiences too. So what are your thoughts on that?
A lot has changed, and it's all for the good. And I don't look back and regret that I didn't have those opportunities. I feel like I've taken advantage of life. I've made my choices. I learned a lot when I was on the Green Bay YMCA swim team, the value of competition and what it teaches you. I have children that are all athletes, and I've watched them grow into their sports and grow as people with more support than what I had, obviously. It has been, it's a journey. It's just a journey. There's more to do, but we've come an awfully long way. And as I said, I don't sit back and think, boy, I didn't have sweats or I didn't have a locker room. I think back and I say, I had an amazing coach. I got to meet some amazing people. I had a lifelong friend in that person, and he meant a lot to me, and he meant a lot to my children. Those are the things that I remember now, and it's just another step in the journey. And I look forward to seeing what my grandchildren are going to be doing with their sports, because I only have one swimmer, but that's okay.
Everyone on this panel has been incredibly inspiring, and it wasn't part of the plans. I want to also thank Dr. Warner, Dr. Laura Warner. She's put a lot of work in behind the scenes for this. Yes, Caitlin Hendrickson, who's not here right now because she had virtual, children, and that's something women deal with on a daily basis, as well as working to be a leader and also run a family. She did a ton of work, and then Amanda, thank you, working with you. I think the big message is, especially women, you can do whatever you want to do, and go and do it, And I hope that there's women leaders in your lives that inspire you to go do and be whatever you want to be. And we're just so appreciative to those who have paved the way for us. Thank you very much.